All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Wet, Wild, and Warpy interview with John DeMaris. Today we're talking about an undefeated GT list, talking Dark Angels. So, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How long you been playing? And, yeah, how long you been playing? What armies you play?
Well, all right. I'm John. Um, I started playing 40K in 1992, but I had a pretty long break. I played War Machine and Hordes competitively for a long period of time. Did a lot of podcasting there. If you're familiar with the Art of War podcast, I started that with Nick. Got busy with life, stepped away from it, so I haven't been doing podcasting for a while. Um, I have played quite a few different factions, but the very first army I ever built back in 1990, like I said, I think it was 1992, was a Dark Angels army, and I'm glad I don't have pictures of those models because I literally sprayed them all black and then I stood back so that I could get like a starry effect on them with
Look,
silver spray paint.
if we were
Just
all if we were all
yeah,
judged by our first models,
yeah.
uh,
Uh, oh
it'd be
yeah. Well,
bad.
I mean, I still can't paint. So I cannot draw a circle, a square, or a straight line. So I have no artistic talent, but that's okay. We
It
can't
does.
all be gifted.
It doesn't matter if you're skilled in other ways, right?
Well, yeah, okay. So anyway, I've been playing Dark Angels for a minute. I play a lot of Ravenwing. You've probably seen me around with, I was running around with, I don't know, nine speeders and a bunch of bikes and melta bikes, and I don't know. I think for a while there I was running around 40 melta shots a turn. That was pretty fun.
I think I played
And then
you against you with that list.
we had an epic game where
It was fantastic.
Drazar got inside me and I never got him out. It was real
Yeah,
bad.
it's well,
It was real bad.
he's hard he's hard to get away from.
He can be, for sure. For
Uh,
absolutely for sure.
but
Um, but
so
yeah, but recently I've been experimenting with Deathwing because with the Armor of Contempt change, I felt like they could be pretty good. So this was the second iteration of a list. I've changed it quite a bit since I played this one. One of the things I learned is you don't really need 40 Terminators because nobody killed more than about 22 in
okay.
any game that I played. So I was like, okay, maybe this is a little bit of overkill. I could put some other utility stuff in here. But
So what you're
anyway.
saying is this is no longer your list. It's been tweaked. It's gotten better.
Yeah, well, I've just gave myself some more tools
Okay.
for different matchups. Although the way the list is designed, it's designed to do one thing, which is just win ninth edition missions. If you look at my scores, I scored 97 in every game or more, except for the final game where I scored 89, and that's where I got blanked on a secondary pretty hard. So, because I made a mistake. I
Mistakes happen.
well, I took warp ritual, and then my stupid uh librarian got shot to death by rangers, which is embarrassing, but it did happen. So, you know.
All right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get cracking on this list. All right.
Okay.
So, you're running a Vanguard detachment.
Yep.
Is that solely because you didn't want any troops in the list?
No, so here's the deal. If you run a Vanguard detachment in Dark Angels and everything comes from certain models, basically models with the inner circle keyword, you get a first company detachment, which turns Terminators into troops with OBSEC.
Yeah.
So so that's pretty good. And then you get refunded 3 CPs. You get a bonus 3 CPs. So it's kind of like having a patrol or a battalion, only it's a vanguard. And then
So,
your model selection is very limited.
right. So it's
Right.
like running a dark Eldar patrol
Right.
because of their building rules where they get CP back and shenanigans
Exactly.
for. It's just a Dark Angels version of it. So it seemed to suit you very well in this particular tournament.
Well, like I said, this list plays um ninth edition missions like a boss, and that's all it's designed to do. It's not designed to kill anybody, although if you get too close, I will put a hurt on you. But it's just designed to aggressively exist and score secondaries like a boss, and have a lot of fun in doing it.
All right. So, just going from top to bottom, the very first thing we have here is a stratagem mark for command. I'm assuming that's a warlord trait.
Nope, marked for command allows a sergeant to get a master crafted weapon.
Okay.
So this one is like the last CP that I spend. in the list, but I like it because I put it. There's a flail on the Deathwing Knights Sergeant, and the damage splashes over. So, and it starts at damage 2. So when you mastercraft it, it goes to damage 3. So if you're hitting Harlequins, for example, and they fail one save, you kill 3 Harlequins,
Yeah.
which is pretty darn nice. You know, same
Uh,
thing with Howling Banshees. You know, there's just a lot of random things you want to swat out of the way. It's kind of nice for that.
well, anytime you can get damage efficiency, right,
Mhm.
it's
Yep.
valuable. So it like for instance, if you're going 2 damage into 2 wound models, that's a good version of damage efficiency. If you get 1 through and kill 3, that's
Yeah.
way better than a 1-to-1 ratio.
It is, yeah. It also allows you to do like weird things like like I did this in a game. I multi-charged a falcon and the fire dragons, and I killed both because the sergeant killed all the dragons by himself, and then the guys with hammers killed the falcon. So it was good. Well, maces, but yeah.
All right. So and then 2 CP for 2 relics.
Yep,
All right.
yep. So the 3 relics that I play with the Teeth of Terra on the chaplain.
Okay.
Um, it just allows him to. I don't like to risk him, so I like to use him to clean stuff up. That's like troopers, things that he's really safe from getting killed by on the swing back.
Okay.
And he ends up with like 8 attacks, strength 6, AP 2, AP 3, and assault doctrine. And so he just goes and charges with the Terminators. The Terminators fight the big stuff that can really hurt you, the big monsters. And then the crap that's around, the chaplain just cleans up. And then they all consolidate to be around the chaplain so that he doesn't get killed. Um, so yeah, I give him the Teeth of Terra. It also gives me an option that I don't use very often, but you can spend 2 CP to run Mantra of Strength on the Chaplain to give him an additional attack and damage 3. So if I really need him to go ham, he can go ham. But you know that's a CP, and then I have forego the other Chaplain litanies. So like I said, I don't do it very often, but if I need him to go ham, I have that option.
All right.
Uh, the other The other relics that I have in the list are on the librarian. I take a neural shroud, which is probably controversial, but basically it gives me a +1 to deny up to 24 inches. And I find in this meta with Eldar and Nids being the top 2 books, a +1 to deny at 24 inches is very welcome
Yeah.
because there's just a lot of psychic flying around that you need to
Yeah. I
deal
think
with.
I think we're gonna see everybody starting to build at least some sort of denies into their list because of how powerful the psychic powers, especially out of Nids, are. Like
Yep.
Eldar's good at it, but Nids have taken the psychic phase to an entirely new level when it comes to mortal wounding.
Yep.
Um,
So it just makes you a little bit more reliable on the denies. And then the other relic that I take, there's a Dark Angel specific relic that can only go on a biker. So it goes on the Apothecary, and it just simply says your invulnerable saves cannot be better than a 5+. It's great efficiency to like he Tokyo drifts his way up in front of a big monster that has a 4+ invul.
yep.
And it turns into a 5+, and then my reliability of killing it just goes way up.
Yeah.
Because the list is also designed to very reliably kill things when it touches them, because it's very important because of the chaplain, which we'll get into in a minute, litany for the 6-inch consolidates. It's how the list moves forward. Most people don't see that at first until it happens. But you know, like I had one game where somebody charged me with some banshees. You know, did some damage, killed some terminators. Well, then I piled in around the banshees and went around them for like 3 inches of movement and then killed them all, and then consolidated 6 inches forward. Then it was my turn. I walked 5 inches forward, and then I charged at +2 inches. So like I'm leapfrogging across the table because you charged me.
And
So
that's
it's kind of nice.
So that's one thing that you see a lot of, especially high skill players do, is taking advantage of every inch of movement that they can, right?
Yep.
So it's not just, oh, a pile and consolidate it closer to whatever I'm hitting. It's how can I use this movement to maximize where I need to be.
Yep. That's exactly right.
All right, so getting into the HQs, I know we've talked a little bit about the Chaplain, but tell me more. Tell me
Okay.
why him over all the other models that you could put in this list.
Well, so here's the deal. All of the characters that are in this list are vital to how I want to play this particular list. So, for example, the Chaplain is mandatory. We talked about the Canticle of Hate, the 6-inch consolidates and paladins. Also, the +2 to charge is always welcome, right? Because you
Always.
turn a lot of charges that are sort of iffy into pretty reliable. That's the other thing that you'll see. This list plays its game plan very consistently, and dice don't get into it too much. It also gives you the option to deep strike some things. So you got a 7-inch charge out of deep strike. It's kind of nice. And then the other litany that I take, so I take, we upgrade him with Wise Orator, and whatever the Master of whatever, Master of Sanctity,
Yep,
maybe.
Master of Sanctity.
Yeah, so that allows him to have 2 litanies active at once.
Okay.
So then, and as a nod to the way this meta is, he also takes the 5 up Feel No Pain to Mortal Wounds, um,
Yep.
which is just welcome. Because the most efficient way to kill these Terminators is with Mortal Wounds.
Yes.
I can tell you, like, shooting them is not where you want to be, and charging them is probably not where you want to be. But if you can mortal wound them, that's really good.
Mortal wounds are it's the pinnacle of killing
Yeah,
these models. I mean,
it is. Yeah. So you'll notice that I have a librarian that's souped up for denies, and I have a 5 up Feel No Pain to mortals. Right.
Yeah.
That's just a nod to shore up the weakest part of the list, and a nod to where the meta is. The 2 most powerful armies are Eldar and Nids right now, right? And they both run very powerful psychic phases. So the librarian is the next piece we need to talk about. One, I get psychic defense, but the reason why he's in the list is so that it gives me the option to play some of the psychic secondaries. Yeah, so I do Warp Ritual a lot because you only have to get it off 3 times
Okay.
to score 12 points.
Yep.
If I'm going to be standing in the center of the table with 20 Terminators, probably it's a pretty safe place for my librarian to stand for 3 turns.
Yeah.
And so that a lot of times just turns into 12 points without me having to do a lot. I give him the Chief Librarian, I think, upgrade, and the Psychic Mastery, so that he gets +1 to cast. So he's got +1 to cast and +1 to deny.
Okay.
And that's simply the reason why it's not Ezekiel. A lot of people will ask that. Why isn't it Ezekiel? Well, a couple reasons. One, I can get a +1 on my psychic actions for my Warp Ritual, which I really want.
Yep.
With this librarian. Ezekiel only gets it on Enteromancy spells. The other reason is I can give him a jump pack, which allows him to Psychic Ritual on turn 1.
Yep.
A lot of times Ezekiel can too, because you can advance, but if you screw up your advance roll or mess something up, then that doesn't happen.
Yep.
The other, I think I gave him a second Warlord trait, which was
so it looks like
decisive tactician,
Yep.
right? And that one gives him +1 or an aura of +1 to advance and charge, which the charge does not stack with the Chaplain.
Okay.
But that's only there for the advance on the first turn. I'll probably replace that Warlord trait. But a lot of times you just got to get to the middle on the first turn. And that extra inch of advance doesn't sound like a lot, but it can be, absolutely.
Well, I mean, it adds up quick, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the difference between rolling a 4 and a 3 on your advance.
Yep.
And if you
Yeah.
happen to roll good on your advance, it's just, once again, it's solidifying yourself against the die.
Yep,
Because
it's making the list more consistent. Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about really quick is the Enteromancy spells are incredibly important, right? So what can happen in the game? I don't know if I mentioned this. We haven't talked about the Apothecary. That's fine. But there's a Fight Last spell, which
Okay.
is incredibly powerful when you have guys with giant maces that smash whatever they touch. So, if somebody has something that's big and scary, like a big Tyrannid Beastie, and I cast Fight Last on it, they're not charging me.
No.
Like, because it just dies before it gets to swing.
Unless they can Fight Last you back.
Right. I mean, that can happen, right? But
outside
yeah,
that.
But so you can always tilt the game in your favor by taking the most deadly thing in melee if they out-threat you and just saying, okay, look, they're fighting last.
Yep. I get to hit you before you hit me. And
Yep.
now your however many points you just put into that killer unit is sidelined for this turn.
It also allows you to multi-charge, so you can charge 2 different things with 2 different units. You fight last one, and then you just choose to activate the other thing that you charged first.
Yep.
And again, remember, this list is designed to whatever it touches to take off the table. which is why the Knights are in the list, which we'll get to. But this way, you can safely charge two things, and they don't get an opportunity to interrupt.
Yep.
So you're just like, whatever, that's fine. We'll just take those off the board. Uh, and
So
you'd be surprised how often you get to charge with this list, because people they just uh, they don't really want to charge you, and because like I said earlier, if they do charge you, you end up with the big pile in,
yep.
and it's a disaster for them. And so you end up taking board control away from a lot of lists because they just don't want to be near those Terminators.
Well, then there's also instances, for instance, in the game versus the Dark Eldar player that you played, we saw some Incubi roll in. They looked like they were going to be actually do some damage, and they just bounced. Like they
Yeah,
did nothing.
yeah, that can happen. That's the other thing that we'll talk about in the strategy of the list. But because I cannot be wounded on anything but a 4-up, and because the worst save that I typically have is a 4-up, 4s and 4s. Remember, 4s is the most swingy of dice rolls. It
It
can
is.
go really good for me, or it can go really bad for me, right? If it goes bad for me, it goes bad for me.
Yep.
But if it goes good for me, your plan turns to ash in your mouth really fast, really, really fast, and it completely changes the tenor of the game. Um,
And it only takes one turn.
and it only takes one turn, right? So what it forces your opponent to do is they have to consider that, or maybe they don't. Like some opponents, I'm going to say didn't. But if you consider that, it forces you to either overcommit into me, which is fine with me because then on my crackback, I'm taking away more
Yep.
than I lost, or you commit what you think is enough, and then things go my way, and you
Yep.
get completely housed because of it. Or it can go the other way too. In which case, I take a little more damage than normal, but my list is built to last. So,
Yep.
like I said, I think the most I ever lost was 22 Terminators in a game,
All
and
right.
it's not that big a deal.
So before we
Um,
go any further, we have a question
yeah,
that was posted, and it's how critical is the oh, I'm going to butcher this, the reliquary of the repentant for the
it's
apothecary?
it's not critical. I just really like it. It just is. It adds consistency. So that's the one that changes um the invols to a 5-up.
Okay.
So it is corner case sometimes incredible, right? So like if you get a hold of the 3-up invul zoanthropes,
Yeah.
right? Uh it's an absolute blowout. If you get a hold of, like, even a lot of times something will have a 4-up invul and have like a lot of wounds. And so you take him to a 5-up and it changes things. It also like randomly allows you to kill characters a lot easier. Because sometimes they can be kind of tricky to kill. It just reduces the resources that you have to expend and increases the reliability in the things that you're going to do. Another great matchup for it is the Tau if they have the shield generators. Again, because Dark Angels have a double movement, you can always get that apothecary where you want it, right? You can always just apply that debuff to whatever you want at least one time. If it happens more than once, like it happens once to an opponent, and then the apothecary has to die. So he usually dies after he's done that. Like that happens a lot. I'm not gonna lie. But if I can jury rig the charge so that I can get him surrounded after the consolidation
Yep.
move, it's bad. Uh, it's real bad. And again, the other thing, remember we talked about that 4-up invul being the swingiest of
Yep.
numbers. If my opponent has a 4-up invul, it adds an element of ruin into my plans. So this just mitigates that, right? It allows
Right.
me to be more consistent. It allows me to say, look, this unit of crisis suits has to die,
Well,
and so
we
I'm going
also
to
know
move.
that even though
Yeah,
4-ups are swingy, 5-ups they don't even compare, right?
no, no,
Like a 4-up versus a 5-up invulnerable save, you will pay many more points to get that 4-up.
yeah,
Um, but it's worth it
yep,
because
yeah,
it swings
absolutely.
good sometimes.
Again, we're trying to build consistency. The other spell on the librarian that we didn't talk about, well, there's two other spells. So this is why the librarian is so good. One, he's got a spell that removes obsec, which is
Yeah,
gross, absolutely gross. And
because
then the other one
that's what
is
wins you
called.
primary right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, this list just wins primary by itself
Yeah.
because I put, we'll just talk about a 5 scenario or a 5 objective game. I put 10 Terminators on 2 objectives and 20 Terminators on a third objective, and then say go. And I'm scoring primary.
Yep.
Everything's obsec. But anyway, the last spell that the librarian has is called Righteous Repugnance, which is reroll hits and wounds in combat for one Dark Angels unit. So any of those Terminator units that gets that um, absolutely obliterates things. Like if I need, you know, if if I want to multi-charge two giant Tyranid beasts, I can
Yep.
because you're rerolling all hits and wounds. And then if I if I park that uh, apothecary in between those two beasts, so it's 3 inches away from each, and they have a 5-up invul.
Yep.
Well, now I get to do thing. I can punch way above my weight class, um, consistently,
Yep.
which is great.
All right.
That's fantastic. Yep.
So before we get bogged down on, let's move. Let's keep moving. And so now we're moving on to the elite slot, and the
Hmm.
first ones up are the Deathwing Knights.
Yep.
Tell me about the Deathwing Knights. What? Why do they concern me? Why am I afraid of them?
Well, we talked about the flail with the splash damage. That's
Yep.
nice. It allows them to be a little more multiple. The thing with Deathwing Knights is they hit on twos. You might be thinking to yourself, well, yeah, John, but a Thunderhammer Storm Shield probably can hit on twos too, right? Well, it can hit on threes with a 1 CP investment, or it can hit on twos if it's during my turn, because Dark Angels have a rule where if I haven't moved on my turn except for consolidates or pile-ins, then I get a +1 to hit. So
Seems
kind of
nice.
nice. It's nice. It really tilts people because they'll charge me, and then I'll be like, I get a +1 to hit because I haven't moved on your turn, and they don't. It doesn't feel very fair to them, which I understand. But then we have to pull the rule book out and have to show them, and then they're like, okay, yeah, that is how it's written.
But you
It's really
never had a
stupid.
chance to move on my turn.
I know, I know. I agree. It's really dumb, but it is what it is. So
Yep.
a lot of people will tell you that they prefer the Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators, or they'll tell you the other argument that you'll hear, and I'm going to debunk both of these here real quick, is that you don't need Thunderhammer Storm Shields because with Armor of Contempt, which does not stack with the Storm Shield, you just don't need that. But here's the deal: if I'm going to move something to the middle of the table, one, I want to make sure that it survives. So that 4-up invul actually comes into play more often than you think.
Yep.
Um, anytime somebody's got a -4 or AP attack, which a lot of times melee attacks can be that way, um, it's nice to have that in the back of your mind that you always have that 4-up invul. Whether I'm standing in cover or not, I have that 4-up invul. And you think, well, shouldn't you just be standing in cover? Well, no, sometimes I'm charging things, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Um, and you know, that 4-up invul is nice. It
Right.
just is.
Because
Uh,
Eldar's gonna make you move to them occasionally.
yeah, they absolutely are. They absolutely are. Uh, and I admit it's kind of corner case. You don't always need it, but it's nice to have in your back pocket. The other thing that I really like is I like doing flat 3 damage. It's just important
Yep.
right now, because you're running into things like big Tyranid monsters. Knights are just on the horizon. I was thinking that we would start to see a lot more knights, which is another reason why the knights are in the list. You have a 2 CP strat that it gives you +1 to wound and an additional AP against vehicles or monsters. So again, in that scenario where I'm multi-charging, 2 T8 monsters, or I'm charging a knight and I want to wound on threes, I can wound on threes, which is big game,
How
right?
many how many wounds do Terminators have?
They have three.
So what you're saying is you hit Terminators real well with the 3 damage.
Yes, that's true. That's true also. So yeah, so that's the reason why, and the reason why there's 2 units of knights on the list was I changed this last minute. I didn't have 2 units of knights at first, but here's what I decided. I decided that if I was going to put 20 knights in the center of the board, the first unit is probably going to get killed, and the second unit's going to go ham, and that's exactly what happened in a whole lot of games. And they're just so much more reliable than Thunderhammers because Thunderhammers have a -1 to hit, and those Terminators are a base 3+ to hit weapon skill, where Knights are a base 2+ and don't have a -1 to hit,
Yeah.
right? So if somebody even lightning fast, I'm hitting on a 3.
Which is
Um,
decent, right?
yeah, which is great because then they still smack
Right.
whatever they touch. And again, if you destroy something that you touched, you get to consolidate 6 inches forward,
And
which is a
apply more
disaster.
pressure.
Well, it applies so much pressure to your opponent because now they're looking at knights bearing down on them, and if somebody dedicates their whole army into shooting a unit of knights, they might be able to kill like eight, seven, eight of them. And so then I have two left, right? Okay, that's not so scary. But if I have 12, you killed eight, and then you're getting touched in a bad way. Like it's going to be a bad touch, and you're not going to enjoy it. So
Or maybe we will.
yeah, hard to say, right? Depends on. Hey, no judgment. Whatever you're into, you're into. It's good. It's good.
All right. So you have two units of those, and then one says it has Knightmaster here. Is that the one with the relic?
Yep.
Um,
Mastercrafted weapon, right? So it's the one that does 3 damage instead of two on the splash weapon.
So and then we have the Ravenwing Apothecary, which
Yep.
we've touched on a couple times at this point.
The
But
big thing we didn't talk about on him is he's got rights of war.
okay.
So he hangs out with the knights. There's a couple things you can do with the apothecary. People are going to ask this question: why isn't he a selfless healer? So let's just go through this math really quick. It's 35 points to give him the upgrade, and a warlord trait, right? And then you can put guys back for free. Otherwise, it costs 1 CP to put a guy back, right?
Yep.
I would rather spend the 1 CP because the first guy I put back pays for the warlord trait. The second guy I put back, it costs 35 points more or less. Well, it costs 47 points for a knight. But if I put back a regular Terminator, it's the same cost. So I'm like, even when I put back two, people are gunning for that apothecary anyway. So a lot of times he doesn't get to put back or I also don't want to feel terrible about, Tokyo drifting him into something so that I can use that reliquary to
Hmm.
lower somebody's invul. So the investment is a little bit lower at him. Plus, I wanted the warlord traits and relics in other places. So everything fits into how the list plays, and so it just didn't have room to make him a selfless healer. But the rights of war is also pretty important when you're standing on the center objective with 20 knights. Having obsec there is pretty sexy. And then, if for some reason the apothecary lives to the late game, again, Dark Angels have a double move. He can move like 32 inches for 1 CP, so you could just obsec and steal an objective,
Yep.
no problem. Just be like, hey, we're just gonna go over here in this back corner where you don't have any obsec on it. You have some stupid, wave serpent sitting back there or something, and I'm just like, take it away from you.
Yeah. Stupid wave serpent.
Yeah,
Don't like
yeah.
that way.
I mean, let's be honest. I'm not shooting it off the table, right?
No.
No,
If you put it back there,
yeah,
it's staying back there.
that's right. Yeah,
Because it
yeah,
can't hurt me back there. All
yeah.
right. So then we have looks like two Relic Terminator squads.
Again, they're the cheapest terminators you can get. Since I use them as backfield objective holders, and this is kind of interesting, I put a 10-man unit on an objective in the back, and people are like, well, gosh, they're not really participating in the game. And I'm like, oh, but they are, because they're telling my opponent, you cannot steal this objective from me. This is 10 OBSEC Terminators standing on this objective. So you can't, like, run a unit over there and
Yep.
just steal it from me, right?
You can't Death Leaper, steal it. You
Yep,
can't drop something in and steal it from me. This is mine.
this is mine. Or if you want to overcommit to taking it away from me, that's fine. You want to put 15 witches on the objective? Okay. I get to kill 15 witches. I'm okay with that. Like
Yep.
you can't do that much. Like it's not going to happen
Right.
more than once a game probably. But anyway, it just creates a situation where they're like standing back there on that objective and you're like, "Okay. Okay, I can't steal it. So now we've got to play an honest game." Uh I
Well, so
don't really
we
Yeah, go ahead.
we saw the Dark Eldar player come in and actually steal it from you,
He
right?
did.
He
Yeah,
did.
right?
But it took
Yeah.
him what, 8 incubi plus Drazar plus the Archon with the Hatred Eternal plus the Gymblade.
Yep. Yeah, he had
And
to
it was all gone next turn.
Yeah, he had to commit really hard to do that. Actually, that was a really tight game. You
Yes.
guys, if you get a chance to watch it, he played because Daniel's a good friend of mine, and he knows what my list does. He had a pretty good way to attack it, which was skirt the flanks and try to get into the relics, and then hope he doesn't get touched too bad in the rest of that game. Um,
It was
but it,
tight. As we were
yeah,
watching it, because we were watching it live, it was. I mean, there were moments where I was like, "There's no way the Drukari player could come back from that," and then
yeah,
later on, I'm like,
yeah,
he could do it. And then later
Yeah,
on, I'm like, it's all over. It's just it was a heart attack in yeah, I was dying.
yeah, yeah. And I made some mistakes in that game. I think if you go back and watch that game, if I had, instead of going back to clear that objective, gone the other direction hard into him with both units of knights, I would have got killed two or three of his to the last, and the game wouldn't have been as close as it ended up
Right,
being. But that's hindsight, right? It's
right.
2020. Also, you don't really want to leave Jazar, 8 Incubi, and an
No.
Archon standing on your back objective. Like, that doesn't feel good.
Well, so
Um,
also, I mean, had you left those guys back there, right? The 8 Incubi plus Drazar plus Archon, they're coming into something else next turn.
oh
Because
yeah, no,
they're not limited
yeah,
on their movement.
we would have flipped the board sides. I would have taken his side of the board, and he would have, which would have been really weird, right? You'd been like, how did all these Terminators get on your side of the board? Like, I understand how the Dark Eldar got over here, but you've got 20 Terminators, and it would have been all pile-ins and consolidates, right? That's
Yeah.
how that happens. Yeah.
All right. So we still have a little bit of time left. So with the time that we have left, I want to go over secondary options. What's your
Yeah.
primary ones? And then we have another question, which is they were wondering what your thoughts are on ancients in the Norse no force org slot.
I love the Ancient. I love it, right? But it's like 100 points, and it's a relic. So it's like, what relic do you lose? I guess I could lose. I could easily lose the reliquary. But I really like having that safety blanket. Uh, and what you'll find is the ancient is great. The ancient gives you -1 damage on one unit, right? Which is fantastic. The problem is usually your opponents will just be like, well, I guess I'll put my attacks in the other unit. Now you are sort of forcing the issue, right? Because if you're coming forward with a unit of knights that has -1 damage that's in their face, I mean, they don't really want to be charged with by them, um, but they might try to like move block them in some way or be generally annoying that way. So that's kind of how that goes. But yeah, I love the ancient. I just don't play. I had a lot of lists with it. I actually my newest list doesn't have an apothecary or an ancient, which feels weird. But that's where I'm at. So
All right. So secondaries.
yeah, so here's where the strength of the list is. I have so many ways that I can attack you. We talked about Warp Ritual earlier, right? That's an easy
Yep.
way to score 12 points. If I take Oath a Moment, which is a Space Marine specific, which says if you have a unit completely within 6 inches of the center of the board, at the end of the battle round, you score 2 points. If you don't fall back, you score a point. If you kill a vehicle or a character, you score a point. When I play Oath a Moment, I max it every game. That's 15 points that's just in the bag. So if you combine Oath a Moment with a mission with an objective in the center of the board, and I put 20 Terminators and one of my characters, like the Chaplain and probably the Librarian too, towards the center, I score Oath a Moment, Warp Ritual, and Stranglehold, and I'll max all three.
Yep.
And it's very difficult to stop me from doing it. Very difficult to stop me. So
Because
that's,
you basically have to table you.
yeah.
I mean, that's what it
Yeah, I
takes.
mean, yeah, and you're like I said, the most Terminators I lost was like 22.
Right.
There's a lot of games I lost like 15, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're not getting tabled. Except Halo Doom Eldar might be able to do it, but it sort of depends on mission and everything else. So that's one avenue of attack. Another avenue of attack that you can do is you can do let's say you can't do Stranglehold, right? There's a lot of games where you can do grind. Like, who's going to kill more units than you are? No one. You can do Stubborn Defiance, which is a Dark Angel specific one, which basically says if I hold one objective with the same unit for the whole game, that's objective secured, I score 15 points. So there's been games where I've taken that to the last, and what's the third one? You can stack that to the last, and then you just find a third one that you can stack with that, and you can put like, you know, 15 Terminators on the two forward objectives and 10 Terminators on the back objective. You Stubborn Defiance one of them, and you just sit there, and you're like, banners would be the other one that you take in that situation. You'd be like, all right, well, I'm going to score 15 on banners. I'm going to score 15 on Stubborn Defiance. And until the last, you've got to come over here and kill these Terminators, but you've got to come to my side of the board to do it. And I'm standing behind all this terrain on these three objectives, right? And I play that game plan, and that game plan also scores a lot and is pretty annoying to deal with. So from a secondary standpoint, the list can play a lot of different secondaries, which gives it some flexibility in its game planning. It can play a defensive game, or it can play an offensive game. But when I play an offensive game, I'm talking about we're going to own the center of the board, right?
Right.
And so basically, in any particular mission, you pick 3 objectives and you own those 3 objectives, right? And if your opponent, he has to interact with you. He can't just let you score 97
Right.
because he's going to lose. Particularly if there's 5 objectives. Now we're talking about primary, right? And I have so many people that sit down in front of me and they take Stranglehold and they kick themselves on turn 2. They're just like, I should not have taken Stranglehold.
Yep.
I'm not getting on these objectives with you. I mean, it's pretty funny when you're playing against an Eldar player and their unit of Banshees gets Will of Assyrian, right? And comes and stands on an objective, all right, because they think they're going to steal it from you because you don't have that many. You know, maybe you have 5 models on the objective instead of the full 10 because of the way you're moving or you're hiding behind cover or whatever. And then they don't charge you because they know they're going to die. Like that happened at least once. That happened in my game with Austin. He's like,
Yep.
"Well, I guess I just have to. I have to stand here. I can't
Yeah.
charge you because
Can't do
you're
anything
going to kill
about
my guys. You're going to move 6 inches forward, which is
Yep.
terrible for me, right? So
it.
like
Better
it
off for
creates
him to
really.
just take the move block,
Yep,
right?
that's
And just
exactly right.
just
Yep.
prevent
So
you from. In fact, while we were watching, because I was watching the game with you and Austin as well, and I could see that your models just didn't move. And I don't know if it was between Austin's move blocking or him just delivering you opponents
yeah,
turn
yep,
from turn.
yep,
Like you didn't
yeah.
have to go find anything.
No, I mean that's what's going to happen. A good player is going to recognize that they have to move block you, right?
Yep.
Otherwise, on turn 4, you're charging their home objective,
Yep.
and you still are owning your objectives because you've got all these Terminators standing on them, right? So um, they'll move, but that means they're trading models for time.
Yeah.
And that can only go on for so long. The game with Austin though was pretty good because
It was good.
I think I only won that by 3 points. He full disclosure, he probably should have won that game, but that game came down to like some crazy dice rolls. First, he made a 10-inch charge to kill my apothecary and take away my obsec from the center of the board. So that was gross. Also, he's such. I mean, I love Austin,
He's
but
absolutely fantastic.
he's such a cock because he just goes, all right, I'm going to re-roll this. It's going to be like a 12. Boom, 10. He's like, look at these hands. He just comes in and absolutely obliterates my.
He's an absolutely fantastic opponent, and
Oh yeah, he's the best.
he's gonna let you know everything that's going on.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
So that.
he also says it was such flair. Like we were doing commentary before the Austin game, and then
Yeah.
during the Austin game, we were like, there's no point. We're not gonna say anything because listening to Austin is more interesting than anything
Yeah.
we could say. So
Absolutely.
we do have a question for you based on your previous listings. What are your thoughts on Ravenwing after the Armor Contempt update?
I think it's really good. Actually, I think it's positioned to be pretty good in the meta, particularly into things like NIDs and everything else. You can alpha strike so hard. The thing that I don't like about Ravenwing is a very much an X and 1 kind of list. I've gone X and 1 in so many events because I have a catastrophic failure of dice on one turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be the turn that I go in with everything, and it'll be like, oh, okay, well, I guess 20 melta shots or 40 melta shots wasn't enough. You know, that happened to me in a game against Nadavati once. I shot him with like 28 melta shots, and I killed 1 Talos.
Yep. Because that can
happened.
happen.
Yeah, and I was like, oh. Every time I rolled a damage roll, I rolled a 1. Every single damage roll, every single melta damage roll, I rolled a 1 in that game. So yeah, I think Ravenwing is great. I think they're positioned to do really well, especially if Armor of Contempt sort of catches on. Ravenwing can really dance around and do a lot of damage to those kind of slow armies, which is kind of interesting. And then Ravenwing has something kind of unique in that they can hunt enemy characters really well, which is nice. And you can take a lot of people out of their game, like Eldar, for example. if you can hunt down their Farseers, they are not happy.
No.
Their game plan falls apart really fast. So no, I love Ravenwing. I'm probably going to stick with some more Deathwing focused units or lists for a while, because I don't think the meta has adjusted and can handle the Terminators right now. Like I just don't think.
Yet.
Yes, well, I mean the meta always adjusts.
It always adjusts.
If people pick up on Terminators, what I'm hoping is Nids and Eldar get a little bit of a nerf. I think Hail of Doom might be a little too good. In which case, my list gets a lot better. In those circumstances, if those two lists get a little bit of a nerf, so it's kind of interesting.
All right. So and then one person asked about maybe some pointers on facing Necrons, anything to look out for against this list, or against a list
Necrons,
similar to yours.
Necrons is just they're going to try and do the same thing that you're going to do, which is obsec you into oblivion, except your stuff hits harder and is more survivable. So you should win that game. You also have probably better secondaries, would be my guess. Not necessarily, but probably.
Right.
You know.
Depending on the mission.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
Is there anything about your list that we missed?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we talked about all the pieces and how they work together, right? Yeah.
So, anything about secondaries we missed?
I don't think so. I mean, we could go through some other secondaries. The list is also very good at playing banners. It's kind of interesting. The Chaplain and the Librarian, because they have jump packs, they can move forward and stand a banner up while the other guys advance around them, as long as your advance roll is big enough to get them in front of them when they move, which I think is like a 4. So that +1 advance is also there for that. So it allows you to play banners on center objectives if you go first, which is kind of nice. Because you got two guys with a 12-inch movement that can get there and do it.
But make sure that you roll your advance before you move your character.
That's right. You got to get your Terminators into spots. And, you know, if there's one piece of advice I can give you for just playing the list in general is because the two small base characters have jump packs, you can always just leave, like, and you can, I usually tell my opponents, I'm going to pre-measure this, but I want you to understand that when I go to move this Librarian, I'm just going to move these Terminators a little bit to make a spot for him in the middle. And so we'll call it like a pre-measure, but I'm just going to save time by doing it this way. I'm going to move these Terminators, and then I'm going to fudge them a little bit because they're not going to move their max move. I'm going to leave a little bit of room so that I can fudge them to get the Librarian in the place where I want him so that he can't be charged by you. And they're always like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then I'll do the same thing with the Chaplain, right? And then the Apothecary, what you can do with the Apothecary, because you have 2 units of Knights, by the way, this works really good. The front unit goes forward, the Apothecary moves and is behind the front unit, and then the back unit fills in behind him so that he's totally safe. At least in the early turns. It gets a lot more complicated when you start doing pile-ins, charges, and all that, but that I can't really explain. You just have to practice that. Yeah.
So next question is, what are your thoughts on storm speeders now that they've come down in points, or do you run attack bikes?
I would run storm speeders over attack bikes.
All right.
For a couple reasons. One, their output is really good for their points. 2, T6 versus T5 is a big breaking point right now in the meta. It just is. And for 1 CP, you can move your invul on a storm speeder to a 4-up without having to advance. So on the turns after the first turn, where you can't really advance those, you can still have a 4-up invul on it, which is kind of nice.
And then your thoughts on split wing, Deathwing mixed with Ravenwing. Maybe all Relic Terminators with bolters and claws, maybe 20 of them, and the rest Ravenwing?
So I played that list a lot. So all of my lists up until the Armor of Contempt change, that was exactly it. It was OBSEC bikes allowed me to steal objectives, OBSEC Terminators to hold objectives, and then so it was like 20 Terminators. It would be like a hardcore in the center, and then OBSEC bikes, and then as many Meltas as I could fit into the list past that. And that list was fine. Like it was a very good list. I did pretty well with it, but I think with the Armor of Contempt change, leaning into the Terminators is where I want to be right now. But I think that list it's very, very powerful, but I think also if you start running it, like if you run into this 40 Terminator list with that list, you probably lose. I mean, that's just the reality of it.
They're just too tough.
You just can't kill them fast enough, and you cannot be in the board space where they are. Like that's the hard spot. So OBSEC bikes are great if you can steal an objective from somebody that isn't 10 Terminators that are OBSEC. Like, how do you steal that? You can't. Are you gonna? I'll shoot some. Cool. Are you gonna kill 8 so that my 3 bikes can steal? You know, that's not a good plan. I'm sorry, it's just not.
So, we'll be wrapping up here in just a second, but one thing I wanted to note about this list is that I think this is one of the lists that really does a very good job of everything in the list has a job. There's
Yeah.
nothing in this list that's like, oh, maybe they'll go this way and do this or this or this or this. They're kind of like no, this list comes into the battle with a plan, and they're there to make you stop them.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I guess the only thing I would say to that is the list is not fast, but it doesn't have to be because it forces you in essence with your ability to score so many points on secondaries and primary, you force your opponent to you basically take the initiative away from your opponent. You force them to interact with you.
Yep.
They can't just skirt you and dodge you the whole game. Like they can't. They just lose. And if they try to do that, they're going to lose bad.
Yep.
And so they have to play an honest game with you. They have to like mix it up with you and try to kill your stuff. And then it's just a matter of we roll the dice and see how it turns out. And my stuff is really hard to kill.
As a primarily Dark Eldar player, this idea of an honest game sounds terrible. We should never do it.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
yeah,
So
that's
we got one last thing. So one of the guys in chat, JD Ford, says, "Not important, but I plan to name the librarian warlord DeMaris in your honor if I
thank
run
you.
a variant of this list, John."
I appreciate that, but it doesn't need to be like that. But I'll report back to you guys on the list that I'm playing now is a lot. It's got a lot more guns. So I play 32 Terminators, and I've got 3 units of Eliminators with las fusils and carbines, so they can move up, shoot, and fall back. And a Talon Master. And you might be thinking, well, that's kind of different. I'm like, yeah, it is, but it gives me a lot more shooting so that I can participate in the game. And then it gives me a lot more board control. And I lose 8 Terminators,
I'm
which
sorry.
is,
I'm sorry. More board control.
yeah, because I can spread out, right? Those Eliminators can
Right.
be sort of flanked out and just blocking off deep strikes, and they can also advance or what is it, concealed positions
Yeah.
forward. There's a lot more flexibility in that list. It's not as rawly powerful, although the Eliminators, it's kind of interesting. They have the same save and cover as a Terminator. They just don't have the only can be wounded on a 4-up. They don't have the permanent transhuman.
Right.
And the things that ignore cover kill them fast. So, and they don't have as many wounds, but they sort of stack into what the list does pretty well. And then the Talon Master's the character, so he stacks into what the list does too, which is generally be unkillable. And then the Talon Master has Rights of War, so it gives you a tool at the end of the game. So to move him out onto an objective and steal one, and use his guns to shoot people off a second objective. So sometimes you can like really flip a game on its head on turn 4 or 5 with the Talon Master. You get opportunities to do that quite a bit, so that's kind of fun.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. If you want to do any shout outs, anything like that, go ahead and give them a holler, and then we'll be signing off.
All right. Well, thanks, Jason. I appreciate what you do. Thanks for streaming those games. I had fun on this interview. I hope people enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the flip.